Okay. Let me go ahead and get this out the way right quick. I saw that Red Dundonian was having some troubles with me, I think, by saying I'm an unironic nozzle. And I'm not going to stray from that term because I think that that does describe me. And I don't think, and he'll probably unsubscribe and everything else. That's fine. That's fine. But while no one else is listening, they're all watching other streams. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and read Requiem for a National Bolshevist again. I read it before, when I showed my face, but I'm going to go ahead and do it one more time. And I put the link. I'm not encouraging you to buy the book. I'm just saying that is the book that this comes from, this clip. It's only 7 pages, so it won't be too bad. Of all the friends I had among German refugees in New York, I had known Karl Otto Pytel for the longest time. I had met him first in the late 1920s when we were students at the University of Berlin. But although we were both in Professor Peterson's class on the German Romantics, that was not where we would or could have become acquainted. Professor Peterson was a zealous nationalist who used his lectures to praise war, and Karl Otto believed in the Gothic revival as part of Germany's rebellion against the humiliating Treaty of Versailles, as a means to liberate her from Western rationalistic capitalism. I, by contrast, love romantic poetry and would have liked to find the link between that artistic expression of human yearnings and Marxism. But such connections, even if found, never provided a basis for conversation between us. In fact, we never discussed anything seriously before we knew that. Even where we seemed to agree, we did so for different reasons. However, it had pleased the university administration to assign to all student political clubs bulletin boards in one and the same big niche of the lobby. Each society had a right to hang its emblem there so that beneath it could meet for lunch, to exchange news, or just to show the flag. Sometimes we had heated discussions there, and it was an extremely unwise decision to force socialists, Republicans, communists, nationalists, Nazis, and Zionists into such close contact. By sheer luck, we never had a brawl in the lobby during my time. Anyway, it was there that I first saw Karl Otto, a lanky figure of somewhat military bearing, flat-haired and blue-eyed, as one would imagine a Nazi student should look, but with a slightly chaotic air. An impression which might simply have suggested itself because he was heavily gesticulating in front of a man in a stormtrooper uniform. Not being far away, I could hear that they were debating Nazi doctrine, and someone whispered into my other ear, "Watch that one, he is a dissident Nazi." It was good news that the Nazis were splitting, but the information was slightly incorrect. Karl Otto never considered himself a Nazi. Of the 6 possible combinations of the word National Socialist Revolution, he had formed the label to which he stuck to the end of his life. He was a social revolutionary nationalist. He considered Hitler a petty bourgeois demagogue, who, moreover, had betrayed whatever anti-capitalistic tenets had been in his program, and who had substituted anti-Semitism and anti-communism for socialism so that he could hobnob with the capitalists. The true German revolution, by contrast, Karl Otto held, could only be socialist, and it could be victorious only in alliance with the Russian Revolution. This latter idea interested Boris Goldenberg, a brilliant Russian Jew who loved political adventure and who had just joined the Communist Party. He also had a soft spot for national revolutionaries and later was able to get himself involved in a Caribbean liberation movement. At that time, he directed the propaganda work of the Communist Student Group, and Karl Otto had just the right idea for him: a German revolution with the Red Army's backing, an ideological fight between the mysterious East and the all-too-civilized West, a sort of cultural revolution that was coming to the aid of a Bismarckian scheme to overthrow the system of Versailles. These were ideas which then were circulating among students. They could have been voiced by Nafta and Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain, and they had actually been voiced by Merle van den Broek, the translator of Dostoevsky, who had introduced the term Third Reich into political. They were not foreign to Count Brockdorff Runzau, the German ambassador to Moscow, or to a host of ideologists who called themselves National Bolshevists. Even Lenin had occasionally toyed with the idea of exploiting German nationalism, and Radek had written editorials for Nazi papers. Some such national revolutionaries actually came over to the communists. The most famous case was one Lieutenant Scheringer, who had started a small Nazi coup on his own, was sent to confinement in a fortress, a privilege for political prisoners who were not workers. There had met some our worker friends, and suddenly shook the world with a manifesto proclaiming his conversion to Leninism. There were quite a few defections from Hitler in the early 1930s, and each time Boris and Karl Otto thought that they were splitting the Nazi Party down the middle. Alas, most of the commotion went the other way. In his former comrade's eyes, Karl Otto was not just a lost soul, but a traitor. Above all, National Bolshevist views had also occurred to the German youth movement, a romantic reaction to capitalism, urbanism, materialism, and rationalism. Karl Otto came from the youth movement and was able to mouth its confused ideologies. Boris saw to it that Karl Otto could address student meetings where he denounced the establishment Nazis and predicted the national and social revolution of the Germans under the Red Army's benevolent auspices. He showed that one could be patriotic and yet collaborate with the communists, or at least look favorably to the Russians. He rejected anti-Semitism. He was an authentic German who despised Hitler. We went to Karl Otto meetings, not because we liked what he said, but because Boris felt he needed support and protection. After all, it took courage to attack Hitler in front of 200 stormtroopers. By dint of facing the same danger and marching together, some of our crowd became good friends with Karl Otto. Although we considered his ideas rather fuzzy, or understood him, we respected him as an honest, decent, upright man. But he always kept his distance in this company, for he wished to continue being accepted as a person of the right. Even while praising the Red Army, he made it clear that he would never be a man of the left. This is something I've kind of felt as well. But anyway, his views were elitist, and he could not accept our proletarian theories. Later, he told me that his deepest desire had been to be recognized by us as a revolutionary. For very few people on the right could be so classified, but even to achieve that, he would not part with his Prussian values, his ideals of military order, and of the barrack socialism that Spengler was then preaching. This persistence was hard to understand in Karl Otto, for as a person he was most unmilitary and un-Prussian. He looked an innate aversion to work, discipline, order. His room looked like an antique shop, or rather, like a second-hand bookstore. In fact, he was bookish to a fault. Even when he had to run for his life, he still carried a carton of books with him. He lived mostly on cigarettes and wine, and shared what little he had with comrades from the old youth movement. They had a common language, and quaint reminiscences. Some had never adjusted to social life, nor grown up to fill their place in society. Others were desperados. He was different from them in one respect, however, which matters in this particular setting. He did not love nature, not a bit. Although he was incumbent as the youth leader, he was bohemian, even if that is possible for a Prussian socialist, a libertarian. He was always interested. Hey, how's it going, Unit Army Ball? We're just reading about this guy, Henry Proctor, who knew Karl Otto Pytel, and we're just reading some of his reminiscings about him. So basically, he was very Prussian, but he didn't really agree with all the real hard anti-Semitism of Hitler, and yet was still a nationalist. And he called himself, and let me make sure I get the quote right. He called himself, oh boy, I lost it already. So it happens when you start reading too much. A social revolutionary nationalist. That's what he called himself until his dying day. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue on here. Quaint reminiscences. Some had never adjusted to civilian life, nor grown up to fill their place in society. Others were desperados. He was different from them in one respect, however, which matters in this particular setting. He did not love nature, not a bit. Although he was incumbent upon a youth leader. Although this was incumbent upon a youth leader, he was a bohemian, or even, if it's possible for a Prussian socialist, a libertarian. Take that with a grain of salt. He was always interested in liberation movements around the world, though of course not women's liberation. Based. Later on in New York, he would support Castro, Ho Chi Minh, and Nasser, and even translate beat literature into German. But I am anticipating. When Hitler came to power, Karl Otto had to flee. Soon, a kangaroo court sentenced him to death, fortunately in absentia. With a mixture of irony and glee, he often told his friends that a Nazi book on race included his photo, the prototype of the Nordic race. He sought asylum in Sweden, but the socialist government of that country told him ever so politely that it could not afford to antagonize Hitler just for the sake of one dissident Nazi. He made his way to Prague and later to Paris, where he was cut off from his own true comrades and brothers in arms. The National Revolutionaries, the Youth Movement, the Romantics, the Mystics. Of necessity, he was drawn to us more closely. His companions had to be Jews, communists, socialists, homosexuals. Boris was in Paris, and a girl of our crowd became Karl Otto's companion for a while, but it was rare that someone turned up in our meetings whom Karl Otto would spontaneously call comrade. The French government had even less understanding than the Swedish for the fact that there could be Germans, and patriotic ones at that, who were against Hitler. The first months of the war, we were both in French internment camps. We got to America after the defeat of France. But in America, Karl Otto had to undergo his deepest change. For most refugees, there was no problem when war came to America. In fact, we had prayed for that moment to come. Every anti-fascist, every Democrat had to lend his hand to the war effort. But Karl Otto was no Democrat and no liberal. He felt no obligation to defend either Western capitalism or Russian Bolshevism. He was a German patriot who feared another Versailles after the war. Yet he worked in an intelligence office in New York. He felt that rather the war there might still be a German revolution. And certain events seemed to point in this direction. Marshal Paulus with 200,000 men capitulated at Stalingrad and formed a committee to establish that friendship which Karl Otto had preached all his life. But on the day of Stalingrad came, he came to me and asked anxiously, "Is it not time now to make peace?" I realized with whom. That's true. This is something that, Strasser should have asked. Anyway. The answer came on July 20th, 1944, when the flower of German nobility and officers rebelled against Hitler, lost ignominiously, and were executed en masse. En masse, basically. Okay. Karl Otto felt that they had saved Germany's honor, though they could not save Germany. From that moment on, our relations grew tense again. We were looking forward to victory, he to defeat. One should have thought the situation in Germany after the war would be hospitable to people of Karl Otto's persuasion. Why did this people in ruins not rebel? Why was there no fertile soil for the propaganda of national revolution? Karl Otto was one of the first refugees to go back to Germany and return deeply disappointed. His Germany was dead. Patriotism had become meaningless. He found friends, but no hope. He was, of course, indignant about the division of Germany, and for the sake of German unity, he opposed NATO, the founding of the Federal Republic, the Cold War, American policy. Although he had never been a pacifist, he now preached neutralist philosophy. Mistakenly, perhaps, he campaigned for Stevenson, Kennedy, McCarthy, and McGovern. At his death, he had traveled far from his original commitments, though he had not given up any of his basic philosophical attitudes. A book dedicated to him on his 60th birthday was entitled Upright Between the Stools. Karl Otto published books on the German youth movement and on the ideology of National Bolshevism. His life epitomizes the strange kinship between the romantic effusions of the German youth movement and the tough policies of the third world dictators. Military or intellectual elites presumed to make revolutionary history behind their people's backs to introduce socialism without democracy, but in the name of nationalism. They are liberationists without being liberal, egalitarian, without being humanitarian, and highly rational execution of their plans without, however, believing in reason. The cultural revolution which they propose to carry out does not bring culture to their nations. On the contrary, it is nourished by the anti-cultural, anti-intellectual ideologies that were first developed in the murky grounds of Richard Wagner's Niflheim, and had come down to us via the proto-fascist movements of the first quarter of this century. Karl Otto was too decent and too noble to draw from his ideology the conclusions which the plebeians found so attractive. He was alienated from his own nation and never managed to join any other. He had left the positions from which he had started out, but remained true to himself to his death in 1976. Okay, so that was a clip from the book Weimar Etudes. That's Etudes. I'll go ahead and type it in the chat here. I don't know if the chat will show up later on, but I'll go ahead and type it in nonetheless. It is also in the description. There's also a link to it on Amazon, so it is currently out of stock. I'm not asking y'all to buy the book. I'm just saying is that, basically if you wanted to talk about it, there you go. So I'll type that out, Etudes. There we go. There we go, yeah. Weimar Etudes by Henry Proctor. I'll go ahead and type that in the chat as well. I should read more of this book because this is fascinating. I mean, that was a nice little short biography of Karl Otto Pytel there. Yeah, who else is in this book? So we've got Henry Proctor, of course, that's his piece. Karl Roddick, Rosa Luxemburg, the Wandervogel Group, Albert Einstein, Karl Korsch, Josephine Baker, Friedrich Meinecke, Walter Rothenau. I've heard of him. I think that he's, Robert Musil, Hermann Hesse, Hermann Struck, Martin Heidegger, Adolf Hitler, Bertolt Brecht, and Karl Otto Pytel. Here we go. So we've got Erich Mühsam, Oswald Spengler, Friedrich Nietzsche, Ernst Junger, Gerhard Hauptmann, Paracelsus, Oscar Maria Graf, and Heinrich and Thomas Mann. So there we go. You know what? I'll go ahead and a little bit more. Why not? Let me see how long this Ernst Junger section is here, because these are not. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that's just a photo of Ernst Junger. Let me see if there's any other mention of him in this book. Those are the photos. I'm an idiot, aren't I? Motifs. Guess this is the whole reason I bought this book. I think I saw this on somewhere, and I saw that somehow Karl Otto Pytel was mentioned. And I figure I would give a brief little idea there. This is about, I'll try to make this an even 20 minutes. I always say that, and then I go for longer. But I figure I would give y'all a brief biography of Karl Otto Pytel, since so little is known about him. I mean, it's kind of interesting. And, of course, I do have the National Bolshevist Manifesto, which I will try to read, which I think gives a much more clear version. And, yeah, it is kind of fuzzy, but that's the whole kind of thing, is that there's, a lot of people just want to view things in a very easy dichotomy where it's just communists, fascists, or Republicans, Democrats. And there's a lot in between. There were people who were against the Legionaries in Romania. And there was kind of a Nazgul thing that went on there as well. And it's the same, I mean, politics is a messy, messy thing, as most of us already know. But I think that it's still interesting, to say the least, what has happened. So, like I say, I think the next stream, though, that we will do is, I think I'm going to wait a bit longer to put out a stream. I'm going to say Tuesday. Let's go ahead and shoot for Tuesday at, I don't know, let's say 1 o'clock, just after lunchtime. Let's say that. So Tuesday, 1 o'clock, we'll go ahead and stream a little bit, and maybe we'll read a little bit of the National Bolshevist Manifesto. How does that sound to everybody? That sound good for the 3 people that are listening? I say, if Red Dundonian does see this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I've made my choice to kind of be more knowledgeable. If you don't like that, okay. I'm not going to sit here and try to lie to you to try to keep viewers. I think that's not appropriate, and you shouldn't, I can't please everybody. That's the whole thing that I say. I can't please everybody. I can't try to make everyone else happy, and to me, I kind of feel the same way. Is that I'm not a huge, deep anti-Semite. I can view that there are issues with that, but I think that it's much more complicated than that. So, anyways, I think I've said my piece though. If y'all want to, you can go back to watching your goober streams of different people and everything, and go from there. Really, it's about all I have to say. I think at the end of the day. Yeah, I think I'll keep it there. Yeah. Okay. I'll keep it there. But yeah. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoy reading that, or listening to that bit there. Sometimes I tend to stutter a little bit more with reading, and sometimes I'll just, my brain will just put in their own words. And so sometimes when I do read stuff out, it kind of, that's why I don't really use scripts too much. I would just rather go off the cuff and just kind of freestyle, But anyways, I think I'll keep it there. So I hope y'all enjoyed that, and at least kind of get a better idea. Hopefully this won't get flagged because I say National Bolshevism, but that's kind of a brief little bit there from Henry Proctor about it. Yep. See you later, Will. See you later, Will DeMarco. And yep, lol, definitely Weebaboo. Let me see here. Okay, so it comes up like that. Oh, okay. Like I said, I'm just testing this out because this is the first day I've done it. I'm just kind of a virgin to this, so we'll see how this goes. But I think that's a good photo. I'll change it up a little bit. We'll change the logo here, and we'll change different stuff around. We'll keep it like that. Anyway, y'all have a good rest of the day, and have a good night, and goodbye. You know what? Actually, let me play this as the outro. Why don't I do that? I'm gonna try that. I kind of intended to do it that way.